For many years as we grew up, I think most of you and I as well heard about why India's reforms, India's growth has been held back on account of being a democracy. Much doubted, slowdown of movement forward in our growth categories in various sectors of economy were directed towards the parliament process, federalism, welfareism, and of course the very frequent elections. I would like to lay to rest some of these doubters about democracies not being able to deliver. It was also mentioned that India is a very large country and democracies really work in much smaller and affluent countries in the West or in countries like Singapore. The fact is, nothing can be far from truth. Today, when the world faces is a very deep divide, deglobalization, one thing that is holding India in a very different league is our democracy. Nation states are wanting to move their global supply chains and global value chains to trusted nations, to trusted partners. And is it therefore any doubt that India's kitty of foreign exchange reserves is swelling up, notwithstanding the recent dip, and heading towards the $1 trillion mark? Is it any surprise that India's FDI continues to surge year after year? What does this all suggest? It very strongly suggests that the world is gravitating towards nations which are open, which have institutionalized processes to deal with investments, and importantly, a country which values democratic system. India chose to be a democracy at the turn of our independence. We learnt it from the British, who are the so-called mother of democracy, and we, to my mind, did extremely well to now come into a 75th year after 17 vibrant and sometimes very noisy elections. What has India gained from this democracy? Look at the economic indicators. Look at the numbers that we are all witnessing. Growth rates are one of the highest in the world. We are moving on all aspects of our economy, be that infrastructure, manufacturing, service industry, and all indicators suggest that when the world slows down, as we are seeing some of that happening, India will continue to surge ahead. Country after country are engaging with India, whether it's at the political level or at the economic level. We have the British Prime Minister here in India today, saluting the largest democracy in the world. The US engagement with India has gone up, including India's participation in the very important Quad alliance, and that also clearly gives us an indication as to why India remains one of the most important nations in the world, because it's a democracy. In my own opinion, some nations which picked up democracy and gave up in between or had flirtation with democracy from time to time, like our neighbors on the western side, have suffered immensely by not continuing the path of democracy. India nourished its democracy. We moved our voting share of the populace from 45% at the time of independence to now 67%, which is higher than the US at 62% and UK at 66%, making it truly a very participative democracy. Our people decide who will govern them, who will take the country forward. Election after election, we see this happening. Today, when we have an elected government which commands a majority in Parliament, that gives momentum to our nation. That takes many of our cherished dreams forward at an accelerated pace. I would also like to point out that across the globe, MNCs choose leaders from countries that have cherished democratic values. Is it therefore any wonder that 10 of our Fortune 500 companies today are led by an Indian? Do you really see even one Chinese heading an MNC today? There is none. So very clearly, I personally believe that the difficulties that we may have gone through these last 75 years, but continuing to be on the path of democracy, has extremely held us well today. In my own opinion, going forward, the world will choose India over other large countries which don't follow democratic systems. We are getting the tailwinds to fire up our manufacturing. I heard Anil Agarwal just before me. He talked about the rich dividends that India can have by exploiting our natural resources. He talked about very large imports of electronics coming from the globe. That is fast changing with the government's scheme on PLI and promoting massive manufacturing in our country. So I really remain very hopeful. And I have no doubt that what Amitabh Kant mentioned yesterday, that by 2047, India will become a high-income country, is going to be achieved precisely because of the reason that India is a democracy. But it's also incumbent upon each one of us to have a unity in action to ensure that we cherish our democratic values, we strengthen our institutions, and we ensure that this democracy that we all are so proud of delivers to our masses at a massive scale. With that, I'll end my address by saying we are blessed to be in a country where all of us have the right to choose who governs us. We are very fortunate that this democracy has actually strengthened over the last 75 years and is on the course to be, to my mind, a world example of being the best democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mittal. Now we request you to please stay connected with us, as we know that there is no better to speak to us, no better way about